Hello. Oh, come on, hello. It's better. It is such an honor to be here with you, and it's incredibly humbling, even scary to be here in your city, this amazing city of learning, to try and share some lessons learned in this place. And I'm going to try and talk about some of our lessons learned in terms of grant making as well as leadership. And I'll put it in the context of our story. You each have your own stories, from Malawi to Taiwan. I'm going to tell an American story of Pittsburgh and of some of our lessons learned. But before I begin, I want us each to think about learners. Today and every day, let's put learners in our minds and in our hearts. And in fact, I want you to put one learner in your mind and your heart, and your love for that learner as we think about our time together and the work that we'll do in the days ahead. Now, I'm guessing you didn't have this learner in mind. He looks slightly Finnish even. I'm Greg, and I'm grateful to be here. I'm joining you from a corner of the world called Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And just last week, I began my 14th year as the executive director of the Grable Foundation, which is in part the Rubbermaid fortune. At the Grable Foundation, we believe that every single child is a possibility. And our grant making focuses on early childhood and matters of school readiness, on enhanced learning in our public school classrooms, out of school time support, which for us means after school, mentoring, and summer learning, support for parents, families, and caregivers as it relates to learning and education, and in all of those places in our community where adults and children are learning together, like a science center, or a children's museum, or a playground. Pittsburgh is a place we like to call Kidsburg. And like for many of you, we have an aspiration that Pittsburgh will be one of the best places on planet Earth to raise a kid and made easier to be a kid. We all understand what we need to do differently, that kids are developing their identities differently, seeking affirmation differently, consuming and producing information differently. And we know that tomorrow's workers, tomorrow's citizens, tomorrow's learners need to have mindsets, skills, and talents that are entirely different than those for which we were prepared. We like to think of them as being endlessly curious and radically empathetic. So like you, we have sought to remake learning. In the Pittsburgh region in 2007, a small group of educators came together to think about the future of learning. That network has grown and grown and grown, such that today it is a network, a learning network in our region consisting of more than 500 schools, museums, libraries, early learning centers, after-school organizations, creative industries, higher education working together to support engaging, relevant, and equitable learning in a time of rapid social and technological change. When we say engaging, we mean that learners will have the time, resources, and support to be active problem solvers. Relevant because there's context that's culturally responsive and community-based. And equitable because we are directing resources to those who need it most. So what does that look like? That looks like hundreds of organizations thinking together the way that educators and leaders are thinking here in Helsinki. How do we advance youth agency and youth voice? How do we advance STEM and STEAM education? How do we personalize learning? How do we support innovative policy that supports this new learning environment? And it results in really concrete things, like policy recommendations to our state government about thinking differently about teacher certification and the types of teachers that we want and need. It means mapping those places in our community where young people are experiencing joy and creativity and wonder, and then knowing where we're not making investments and need to make investments. It means experimenting with things like artificial intelligence and cognitive tutoring to personalize learning and to use technology in developmentally appropriate ways. And it means providing really practical steps for schools to implement things like computational thinking across the curricula from the early years through high school. Ours is a region where annually nearly 2,500 teachers are participating in dozens of peer-led professional learning communities as they improve their craft and the amazing things that they do in their classrooms every day. It's become entirely normal for learning scientists, for example, to work with educators in museums or libraries or out-of-school programs to think about the learning experiences that they're creating for young people. For teachers to work alongside technologists and artists and designers to create these new types of learning experiences. In our region, we have recreated hundreds of classrooms in and out of school, places where young people are experiencing technology-enhanced learning and maker-centered learning and project-based learning and what they call here in Helsinki phenomenon-based learning. All of us in this room are trying to create these magical, hands-on, project-based learning experiences for young people to develop the knowledge, the skills, the capacities that we all want for them, things like STEM and technology-enhanced learning. We're creating spaces for creative industries to partner together with educators as they develop the products and services that will support this new type of learning. And we're engaging families. How do we engage parents, families, and caregivers in understanding how learning is being remade? Much like Helsinki Education Week, we host something called Remake Learning Days, a remarkable festival of modern learning. In fact, that was held last year in 9 American cities. 100,000 families participated. And to give you a sense, in Pittsburgh this past May, there were more than 300 events attended by nearly 20,000 people, designed to help parents, caregivers, families understand what is it that's exciting my child about project-based learning? What do I do with coding? How do I take advantage of maker-centered learning? How do I think about my region as a campus for learning? And how can I support my child and the children in my life? Ours is a region with more than 500 schools and organizations working together. Nearly $100 million invested over 12 years. And so over these 12 years, I dare say we have some lessons learned. These are our lessons, and ideally some of them will resonate with you as you think about your own work in your place or in many places across the world. First of all, words matter. We do not use the word reimagine education. We don't talk about transforming education. We talk about remaking learning. We say purposefully remake because there are extraordinary things happening in our classrooms every day. There are things that are timeless and classic about education in that relationship between an adult and a child. What we need to do is remake learning for our times, to take advantage of what we're learning from learning sciences. You just heard me use the word learning. We don't talk about education. For us in our context, education conveys schooling. Whereas learning conveys a sense that young people are learning in all types of places, in and out of school, anywhere, anytime, at any pace. For us, it's important to have many front doors. You might have an interest in beekeeping. I might have an interest in, say, making wine. Just as we as individuals have interests, our schools and organizations have interests. Some might have a STEM orientation. Some might have a phenomenon-based orientation. Others might be really attracted to educational technologies and the deployment of those. For us, all of those things are ultimately leading to the types of places where we're creating experiences for young people to develop those knowledges, those skills, and those sensibilities to become the learners we want for them. We believe it's important to make lots and lots and lots of little bets. That $95 million over 12 years has been distributed largely in increments of $1,000, $5,000, $10,000, $20,000. We don't think change happens in some sweeping declaration and some grand moment, but rather by trusting educators every single day in lots and lots of places to experiment in developmentally appropriate and smart ways, in ways that they're comfortable and excited. Equity matters. It is not enough to say that we are committed to diversity, equity, inclusion. That is not enough in 2019. For us in our region, as we think about the deployment of support and resources and time and energy to the learners that need it most, we've identified that as learners in poverty, learners of color, rural learners, girls in STEM, and learners with exceptionalities. We are all working to create remarkable learning experiences for every single child who feels marginalized or doesn't yet feel like he or she or they belongs. And that's our responsibility in all the places where we live. And to engage parents, families, and caregivers. Another important lesson learned. All of the work that we are doing is not going to matter unless we make this sticky for the adults in kids' lives, and that they understand it, that they value it, and that they want it and demand it, which is why it's so important that we tell our stories. That's part of the incredible brilliance of HundrED, of telling your stories, in telling our stories all around the world. It's important to invest in narrative and video and text. We all want to take people to some other place. We've got to show them where that place is and why and how they belong. And lastly, we always, always, always need to put the learners first. That learner that you have in your heart and your mind as you think about your work every day and why you do what you do. For us in our region, this is how we've tried to identify what we hope for learners and what learners hope for from themselves. That they learn to understand their place as connected and to take advantage of things in and out of school. That they question and examine and dissect their social systems and inequities and issues like racism. That they have deep and caring relationships with adults. And we do that because just like you, we are trying to help every single young person find their passion, find their interest, and find their purpose. And so in Pittsburgh, in Kidsburg, that is why we have sought to remake learning. Because every single young person is a possibility. Every single young person belongs to the future. Every single young person has something worth giving. Thank you.